This past weekend, I had a really unique opportunity to play a bunch of different role-playing games, including Pirate Borg, Blade Runner, and Dragon Bane. These are all 3 RPGs that I wanted. I also played Shadow Dark, and I also played 5e, but I've talked so much about Shadow Dark and 5e, I don't really need to talk about those here. And I really liked these RPGs. Pirate Borg was really fun. Pirate Borg is a version of Mork Borg, very simple rules, very straightforward, really excellent production values. The creators of Pirate Borg were very kind to send me a review copy of the physical books. The physical construction of Pirate Borg is really, really excellent. It's a beautiful book, really, really cool stuff. All the kind of cool tables and everything that you can find in it. Excellent artwork, far more legible than the original Mork Borg, I will say. And I was definitely eager to run it. It has kind of a very interesting setting where it is set in our world, probably in like the 1800-ish time frame, where you are pirates that are between sort of 3 different empires: the corrupt British Empire, the corrupt French Empire, and hordes of undead. And you're kind of surviving through all of these different things. I'm not normally a big fan of running games that are set in our world because it's very easy to kind of stereotype things that are going on in our world. But I think that Pirate Borg could really lend itself to a fun campaign or short set of adventures where you are pirates that are trying to, you're punching up. So you're pirates that are dealing with the corrupt British Empire, the corrupt French Empire, and the undead, trying to protect those. You're not like heroes. You're still pirates. You're still engaged in piracy and things like that, but are trying to protect those who need protection. I like to think of it like if I was going to run a campaign in Pirate Borg, I would run it like the A-Team. Like everyone's after you all the time. Everyone kind of thinks you're bad, except the people that you're actually helping, right? And the people that you're helping recognize that you're helping people. That wasn't how our adventure played out when I was playing Pirate Borg at the convention. In that case, in our adventure, to make it really quick, we were our ship was in the doldrums. Our characters were introduced as being part of this ship, and we were stuck, and we were all starving to death, and going to die to exposure and lack of water. And a sea hag, we didn't know she was a sea hag at the time, but a sea hag said, "I can save you from this. But in order to do so, you have to go to this temple on this island and take this artifact and bring it to me." And we said, hell yeah, that sounds great, right? Like, of course, it's better than dying. Like, there wasn't really much of a choice. Like, oh yeah, it's that or starve. Sure, we'll go steal an artifact from a temple. That sounds cool. So she's like, bang. And she sends our ship to the island, where we find out there's a native populace there, and they're happy, and they are isolated from all of the other horrors of the world. So the British Empire hasn't screwed with them, the French Empire hasn't screwed with them, the undead haven't screwed with them. They are also shapeshifters that can shapeshift into tigers and stuff, but otherwise seem totally like nice people, except they're isolated. They don't want us there. So 4 of our characters were like, "Oh, can we help you?" And they're like, "No, get on your boat and leave." And 2 of our characters, including mine, broke into their temple, stole their holy war club, and left. And when we did, the whole island was destroyed, and everybody on it was destroyed except for us on our boat as we sailed off with their holy artifact to give it to this evil hag. And I remember my friend and I, who were playing, both looked at each other and goes, "Are we the baddies?" And we're like, "I'm pretty sure we're the baddies." Like, "Oh yeah, we were the baddies. We just killed an entire native population in order to steal this war club." Right? And we're like, "Huh," right? That was funny. So then I played Blade Runner. And Blade Runner uses the same kind of mechanics, I think, that like the Alien RPG does. Free League runs it, I think. I think it's Free League, right? And Blade Runner was another one where we had this really interesting moral quandary that we were investigating. So we were part of the Blade Runner group. We were investigating a reporter who was anti-replicant, who had been shot by 2 people, and they thought there might be a replicant reason for it. And it turned out one of the 2 people who shot him was a replicant. And then there were our characters, and my character was a guy who fought side by side with replicants and liked them. My wife's character was a replicant, and then we had other people who were sort of anti-replicant for one reason or another. And I think that the game leans into this idea of like the moral issues of like, are you on the side of replicants and are you not? My issue with that is that right from the very get-go, if you go and watch the original version of Blade Runner, they make it very clear that replicants are essentially another way of talking about race. And that, and then the people's approach towards replicants is basically the same as like the people's approach of racism in our world. And when you have characters who are like, well, some of them are racist and some of them aren't, that is certainly something you want to talk about before you start running the game. Because we actually had situations where like one of the replicant was hung, and I'm like, wow, that is a terrible metaphor, right? That is a terrible bit of imagery to put, because something we did got a replicant caught by an anti-replicant league who then hung them. And I'm like, whoa, that is a problematic image if I ever saw one. And so that was really an issue. And then I played Dragonbane. There was no moral issues with Dragonbane. We went to there was a tower that's sinking underneath the water, and we had to deal with a bunch of puzzles in order to go through the tower and I think collect some kind of pearl or something at the top of it. And we got out. So it was really, I should have said hanged. The replicant was hanged. So Dragonbane, the story of Dragonbane went really fine. I liked the mechanics of all three games. I actually, and I think that there's a really fun way that you could play Borg essentially by playing, the way I would do it is by playing it like the A-Team. I didn't like Blade Runner. And one of my issues with Blade Runner is because it's not problematic itself, but it can very easily lead to such problematic situations. And one of the things I think about with Blade Runner as a story is that both of the big Blade Runner movies are about one character coming to grips with their own views of humanity. And I don't know how you do that in a group situation with everybody's got different backgrounds. I talked to my friend Teos, who's been running a long-term Blade Runner campaign, and he says he's been having a really good time with it and that all of those stories have been interesting. But he also recognizes that, like, in a mixed group, and especially in like a one-shot game with strangers at a con, it could be a real problem. And that really comes to this topic of how we deal with morality in role-playing games. Now, I am certainly not saying that there needs to be like one general rule about how you deal with morality in role-playing games, but I definitely think it is worth the time and energy for groups to talk about the expectations of how we're going to handle morality in the role-playing games that we run. So you could, for example, say, hey, all of us are happy just really being pirates playing Pirate Borg. Like, we are the baddies, and that's going to be okay. And if you and your group are all on board with that, and everyone has made it clear like how that's going to work, and I would still say you probably want to have some safety tools in there to say, hey, look, okay, this is where I draw the line and I'm not comfortable with this. And maybe the two safety tools that I really like when I'm running role-playing games are some kind of X card. I use a thing called pause for a minute, where I say anytime anybody says pause for a minute, you stop, you break character, and you talk as players about what's going on. And you can say, I would really rather not do X, Y, or Z. I think a GM can do a lot of good by, if they think that there's a situation, saying, let's pause for a minute. Is everybody okay if we do this thing? Anybody not, are you guys all good with it? And if they say, yeah, you go, okay, game on, we're back in, right? And then the other one is lines and veils, where you say, even if you're running a pirate game where you're a bunch of evil pirates doing evil pirate stuff, you probably want to have some lines about, like, we're not going to do stuff, like, we're not going to murder children, or we're not going to do this stuff, or we're not going to do that stuff. You can still have some hard lines about what you're going to do. And you could have veiled stuff of like, okay, well, we're not going to delve into the details of torture. We're going to veil that, but we still have it, but we veil it. So you can still have lines and veils. I think that it definitely behooves groups where morality is a question in the game to have those tools. I think every game should have those tools in place. You can disagree. If you don't want them, you don't have to have them. I know in games I want to run, I would really prefer to have them. They don't take any effort to put in there, and they can really help steer the game in a fun direction. It's not just about, people are oversensitive and we have to worry about it. No, it's also about making sure the game we're playing is fun, and that we like where we're going, and we understand where we're going. And I think that's where the topic of morality in role-playing games matters, is having this baseline understanding of why the game and how the game is operating. And it's why I really like the idea that when you come to the agreement about it, you have a bond that the characters share that follows along the lines of the morality of the game that you're following, which is like, we are all heroes that are here to protect the people of the city of Arches from evildoers who would try to harm the city. Right? You're not just bad guys. You could change that to, we are dungeon delvers who are seeking the greatest treasures we can from the ripe plunders of the city of Arches. If you and your group are on board with that, that can be the theme of your adventure, and you can define it up front. So I think that the main thing when I think about morality in role-playing games is defining that idea that if you are going to play Blade Runner, you can say things like, and again, sort of like the stage. The expectations are like, this is how you are, the behavior and how you're going to treat and be treated by and as replicants. And here are some lines and veils that we don't want to cross because it's just ugly. Like, we don't want the game to just go in ugly areas. And you could say, like, having us all deal with our own connections to replicants, both good or bad, is something we're individually going to find out. But that could mean that we're going to have inter-party conflict. Are you guys okay with that? Right? And if everybody says, yeah, that could be part of the fun of the game, then you're like, okay, that's great. But if you're like, no, I'd really rather the group is working together, then maybe you need to shift things around so that it's clear that the general moral take of the characters are in the same way. So I think it is worth thinking about when you're building your campaign, particularly if you're a GM and you have an idea of like, what are the moral sort of boundaries that you expect for how the game is going to go, how the characters are going to behave to each other, to the world, to the story of the adventure. You need to communicate that. You need to tell the players what is going on, or you need to discuss it with your players during your session 0 to make sure that everybody's on board with the direction. If you are expanding the borders of the morality so you can have evil characters and good characters together, you want to explain how that's going to work so that the game doesn't just evolve into players getting pissed off or sad or bummed out or hurt. That is an important thing to talk about. And it was really clear to me because we were playing these one-shot games where, there were safety tools in operation. You were X cards if you want to do anything. Nobody hit them, but we were all like, what should we be doing? Like, it wasn't ever clear to us when we played Pirate Borg. Given the kind of characters we had made, we said, well, we wouldn't have a problem destroying this native civilization, and we did. But afterwards, we're like, was that really what we wanted to do? Like it was never... I think a conversation could have happened of like, you guys are pirates, you get to decide. Like, even telling us, hey, there's going to be a moral question aside, and you guys want to decide whether or not you're going to be, on what side of it you're going to be. I suggest you do that as a group so that you don't have a bunch of intergroup conflict over whether or not you're going to decide one way or the other. I think that could be really worthwhile. So it made me think about it a lot. I don't have any hard rules for any of this, other than to say it's certainly something you want to talk about with your group. And I think having some fundamental tools in place, like an X card, like a let's pause for a minute, like lines and veils, takes hardly any work and definitely makes games head off into a better direction than if you just leave it to the Wild West and everybody is doing whatever they want to do, and then players are shooting, characters are killing each other, and other players are really pissed off, and other players are like, man, did you realize what you just did? I think there's lots of problems that can be short-circuited early, that can be dealt with early when we talk to our players, we have a session 0, and we have some basic understanding of what the moral directions are about the game that we're going to be playing in. Every month on the Sly Flourish Patreon, we have a monthly Q&A. It is a thread where anybody can ask any RPG-related question. I answer all the questions every Friday morning on the Patreon. Sometimes I take those questions and I bring them here to the talk show so we can dive into them deeper.